Hey everyone, it's Nightharo here, and today I've got a guide for the Endless Archive. So today we're going to go over the meta of the archive. I'm going to kind of explain the structure of the archive. We're going to talk about adapting your strategy and getting upgrades. I'm going to explain how the trash pulls work. We're going to talk about the bonus areas, how to get the buffs and achievements for those, which are extremely important for unlocking some things later on. And then we're going to talk about Marauders, how to survive them and get through them, because they're probably the hardest thing in the archive right now and a little overtuned. After that, we'll talk about the individual bosses, just kind of some generic advice on those. And then finally, throw out Replicana, the end boss of the archive. All right, with that, let's go ahead and get into it. So let's start off with the structure of the archive, and I personally find this incredibly confusing. So let me see with a visual aid and an explanation if I can do this. So the smallest unit of kind of time in the Endless Archive is what's called a stage. And a stage is best defined by when you enter a portal and then when you finally leave the portal. That's a stage. Everything in between is the stage. So the way it works is there's one trash pack stage, and then there's a second trash pack stage, and then finally a boss stage. And each one of those stages of trash packs, there's going to be 3 ad pulls. So you have 3 ad pulls in between a portal, 3 more ad pulls in between 2 portals, and then finally the boss fight. And those 3 stages there, 2 trash pulls, 1 boss fight, is considered a cycle. And then 5 cycles constitute an arc. And then there are 4 unique arcs. You can keep going, but everything just continues in the same manner, but ramps up in difficulty and damage done to you. Now you get buffs as you go along through the Endless Archive. And what happens at the end of each stage, again, right before you go into the portal, you will get an option of a verse to choose. And at the beginning, it starts out, you only get 2 choices, and you can unlock a 3rd choice. There's a offensive, a defensive, and then a utility choice that you have there. And these are called verses. These verses only apply to the next stage, and then they go away. So just keep that in mind. And honestly, during the first arc, I don't even worry about these verses because they go away and it's not difficult enough that I really need them. But choose your own difficulty, right? Now, at the end of each cycle, that means when you're fighting kind of the mini bosses, those like 60-something, 70-something bosses that they've taken from other content in the game and put it in the center of a circular platform, at the end of those, you get a vision from that. And the visions will last throughout the rest of the archive. So by the end of Arc 1, you will have 5 visions in total, although only 4 will help you with the last boss. Okay, hopefully with the explanation and the visual guides, that makes sense for you guys. Let's go ahead and move on and start talking about some other stuff. Now to talk about the meta, which is kind of a loaded word because it's used to mean a lot of things. What I mean by this is the traditional use of meta, and I mean like looking at the archive from an outside perspective and going, how is this structured? How is this best to approach this? I don't mean like, hey, what's a meta setup? I'm not talking about that. So the way that archive is structured, there are no direct DPS checks, okay? The leaderboard is not timed, so it's not about moving quickly through that. Now, at the same time, if you want to go really deep, that's going to take you hours and hours. So you do want to be most efficient. So what I would recommend for everybody to do is to start with as much DPS as you feel comfortable with, okay? That's going to vary for each individual person. And then as you go deeper into the archive and you find that you're starting to take more and more damage and you're more worried about dying, maybe you die once, then you start adding in more tanking things, less damage and more survivability focused things. That might be swapping gear, it might be swapping skills, changing CP, could be a lot of things. There's a ton to it, but that general structure is still the same. And then the other thing to really consider is to make sure that you're unlocking the various upgrades. There's upgrades that give you more choices on visions and verses. There's one that gives you an extra life, increases your speed, and so on and so forth. There's 5 buffs in total. I think that the archive was really designed for you to eventually unlock all of those to really help you go further and deeper into the archive. There are also temporary vision buffs that you can purchase, and you can use them later on when you're in important situations. Those visions are also extremely cheap if you're going pretty deep into the archive, and so it's something you can just keep it quick slotted, and then when you get to a particular area where you want it, you can just go ahead and use it. And again, it's not very expensive, so it's something you definitely want to consider using. But we'll talk more about how to unlock those various upgrades in the bonus areas section, and likely in the near future, I will do kind of a all visions and verses and kind of rank them for you guys to give you a good idea of what to use, and more importantly, when to use it for your build, because I think that's the most important thing. There's an incredible diversity of builds that can be used in the Endless Archive, and there's also reasons to maybe change up your build partway through so that you can most optimally use the visions and verses you get along the way, which are pretty significant for many of them. All right, now let's go ahead and move on and talk about trash. So again, to get through the archive in a reasonable amount of time, you really want to bring a strong trash setup ideally. And the way each area starts off with the trash pulls, you move into the area where you have the inky ball kind of leaking everywhere, right? And that kind of starts the trash pull. During these phases, you will have elite ads that will spawn that are important to deal with, and they will have a pattern after Arc 3, Stage 4. Before this, they are generally easier, and after it, it's kind of the final form. You're going to have a set of ads that spawn, and one of them is going to be an elite ad, and then you're going to have a second trash pull with no elite ads, and then you'll have a third trash pull with 2 elite ads in them. And those elite ads are very important and probably something that has been wiping a lot of people, and they just didn't quite realize it. And then you'll have a break, and you'll have another set of ads, and then you'll have a boss. Now, I will note that early on, you will not see an elite ad on the first first and third trash pulls of each stage. That actually ramps up, but once it gets there, it just repeats that order over and over again. So for a trash setup, I recommend strongly something like Azurblight. Azurblight is an amazing trash set right now and something that will absolutely work really well in here. You could also pair that with several other sets, which is going to vary, which set is best based on what arc you're in and how long it's taking you to kill each one of those ads. So the things that will work in really later stage might not be optimal in the early stages and vice versa. Something, again, though, like Azurblight, Soulzan, Order's Wrath is a crafted set you could use. You could even use like Whirl of the Depths since it is an AoE proc, and that'll work pretty well. But what you want to try to do with the ad pools is, generally speaking, get them grouped. Now, you can do that several ways. You can line of sight, which means kind of hide from them. And what'll happen is all the ranged ads will move until they can see you, but they'll generally stay pretty far away from you. And of course, the melee ads will come directly towards you. Once the ranged ads are stacked when you've line of sighted them, then you can just move over to them if they're not very close to you. And of course, all the melee ads will follow you, and then you'll end up with a really nice stack. I strongly encourage you to do that early on as soon as the pool starts, because they will just group themselves. So line of sighting them early is the best way to do that. Now, once you've got them grouped up, obviously having AoE skills is also extremely important. You don't want to be doing a bunch of single target damage if you can at all help it. And then probably the thing that wipes the most people is the elite ads. There are 5 kinds of elite ads. There's infusers. These are really rough. You really want to keep an eye out for the infusers. They have a channeled ability that they do. It's similar to what they do in Kind's Aegis that heals enemies and enrages them, causing them to do increased damage. This will easily lead to the ads killing you. So you want to keep an eye out. If you see an infuser, go stand near them and be ready to interrupt whenever you start seeing that channel go out. And that's really the theme through a lot of these. The other one you have to worry about is Flame Shapers. Flame Shapers are similar to like the Craglorn trials that you've seen there. What happens with them is they start channeling and they shoot out fireballs that will quickly kill you. So whenever you start to see them holding their staff up in the air and you start seeing fireballs go out, make sure you interrupt them. And then other than that, they're not too much of a problem. After that, there's Spell Thieves. These are really annoying as they'll drop AoE negates on the ground and they will eat all of your ground dots, and that really hurts your damage. So there's a couple of things you can do with a Spell Thief. One of them is stand a little bit away from the stack for a bit, and then once they drop their negates, roll dodge out of it, and then go ahead and bring all the melee guys near the Spell Thieves that you were standing a bit far away from, and then go ahead and AoE them down and hopefully kill them before they have a chance to drop another negate. Also, the AoE from the negate, you do need a roll dodge. I mentioned that. You need to roll dodge quickly out of it because it does do quite a bit of damage. The fourth kind of elite ad that you need to worry about is the Sun Eaters. Sun Eaters aren't that big of a deal. They have a fire AoE that's in 180 degrees in front of them. If you just move behind them, you don't really have to worry about that, and you can just let them channel and let them cast and be just fine. And then the fifth ad is the Totem Masters. What they do is they summon various totems. Generally, they're really telegraphed as far as the AoE area that it's going to be affected, and you can easily move out of it and not really have to worry about it too much. Again, similar to the Spell Thieves, if it does happen to spawn and it's in a terrible spot, don't be afraid to run away and line of sight them and kind of pull the ads to a new spot. And generally speaking, that's not too difficult with just these kind of ads, even if you're in a relatively small arena. Another couple of pro tips here, mostly from Daedric, is that, when you get to the end of a trash pool and you've killed most of the mobs, if you're low on magic or stamina, take a moment to get back resources, heavy attack if you need to, and get prepared for the next set of ads, especially in the later rounds. That can really help you. The other thing is that save your ultimate. We mentioned that early on you'll have an elite ad that will spawn in the first trash pool, and then you'll have 2 in the third trash pool. If you can get back your ultimate between the first and third trash pools, go ahead and drop it on that first elite ad. If you can't, then what you want to do is save it for that third trash pool and drop it when you have 2 elites. Again, making sure that if you do happen to have Spell Thieves, that you stand away from them, get that negate dropped, and then go ahead and drop your Destro ult on them. Don't drop it on top of them. The negate always spawns on you or your ally. It will not spawn on the ads themselves. So if you do stand far away, you can go ahead and drop your ulti, but you don't want to drop your ulti and then have it eaten by a negate. It hurts your heart to see. So keep that in mind. And as you get further in, if you're at the end of the second trash pool and you dropped your ulti on the first one, you could just light attack and take your time killing the last couple of ads in the second trash pool to make sure that you have ultimate to drop it on the third trash pool whenever it spawns. And that's the kind of thing where it's like taking your time, thinking about what's going on will really help you get through the archive and going at it smarter, not harder. Okay, now let's go ahead and move on and talk about the bonus areas. So these are absolutely worth doing, if nothing else, for the achievement, at least to unlock the upgrades. They also give you an extra verse that will give you a buff for the next stage. So there are 5 types of bonus areas. The first one is a herding room where you get turned into a goat, which is really fun. In this room, you're being chased by a butcher. All you need to do in this room is mostly just keep moving and keep running away from the butcher. And what you can do is kind of walk up around to the top and then jump off the edge, and the butcher will have to walk all the way around. Now, it takes a minute to spawn, but eventually a sweet roll will spawn, and what you need to do is just run up and synergize to eat the sweet roll. Once you've eaten 3 sweet rolls, you can then turn around and ulti on top of the butcher and it will kill him, and that's how you complete the room. So again, just run around, eat all the sweet rolls. It's not timed. Run up the cliffs, jump off to give yourself some room. They will drop AoEs on you, so you do need to be careful if you have the butcher next to you, but there's also a sweet roll. It's probably best to kite them for a minute, get them away, and then come back and eat the sweet roll. If you take your time, you shouldn't have too much of a problem with this room. Just make sure you keep moving. That's the main thing, and keep moving in the opposite direction of the butcher. The second room that we're going to talk about is the fight room. So this is just a simple mini boss that you have to fight. She spawns in the very center. You just DPS her down. She will spawn adds, and she will also spawn crystals. When she spawns the crystals, you do want to move over and kill those. Largely, I would ignore the adds and just focus down the boss. But if you're solo and you get to the higher stages, you might need to turn and focus down the adds some so that you don't get too many and they kill you. But in general, you can just kill her and then focus the crystals when they come up, and you'll be just fine. And she'll teleport around the room, and it's kind of annoying, but by and large, you'll be okay. She also has a couple interruptible things, but again, just you always interrupt whenever you see someone channeling. And then our third room is the switch room. So this is kind of a puzzle room. If you go stand in front of these altars, it will light up and show you, like, if you hit this button, which one of the tentacles will go away first. You can actually do this solo. You just need to memorize the order you need to go in. If you're like me and you've got the memory of a goldfish, what you can do is just have a little notepad and write down, left to right, number them 1 through 6, and just write down the numbers you want to start with. So maybe it's 2, then 4, then 6, then 1, and just write it down as you walk by each one of them, looking at the order. And then once you're ready to go, you hit all 6 of them in sequence and then run out, and you can actually make it across even without a speed boost, although that can be helpful. If you're duos, your teammate can just stand back there and can just hit them in the right order. Don't be like me. I failed at this several times the other day, and it was honestly a little bit embarrassing. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning. We had gone way too deep into the archive, and I probably should have just gone to bed, but it happens to the best of us. So don't feel bad if you mess up on any of these. All right, now our fourth room is going to be the Watcher room. So this is really fun. You're actually in kind of a more traditional library-like room in this mini game, and you get transformed into a Watcher, and you need to go catch the tomb shells. Now, I assume these are like domestic tomb shells that have just gotten loose, and you need to go capture them so you can bring them to a good home. I assume that's what's going on in this mini game. So when you get transformed into a Watcher, you have 5 skills. So the first skill you're going to use is your second skill. What this does is it tells you where the tomb shells are. There is a range on this, but it is very large. So if you hit it, nothing happens. You just move around a bit and then try to get in a few seconds once the cooldown is off. But the idea here is that it will light up and you can see glowing through the walls where the tomb shells are, and then you can just roughly head in that general direction. Now, eventually you will get close to the tomb shells. Whenever you do, to capture them, you need to hit the first skill on your bar, and that has a little bit of a cast time, so I do recommend hitting it as you're approaching the tomb shells. And then our third skill here gives us a bit of a speed boost. This can be helpful because there's tentacles and other whirlwinds and stuff moving around. You can sprint past the tentacle if you're careful enough, and you won't actually get hit by it as long as you get the timing right. There are also adds that run around. Sometimes they will aggro on you. If that happens, then you actually want to use your number 4 skill, which will slow them down, and then use 3 to speed yourself up, and you can, generally speaking, just run away from them. If you can't get away or you feel like you need to kill them, the number 5 is the skill that will actually do damage to them. But again, most of the time I recommend probably just running away from them, slowing them down, speeding yourself up, and then running away. I will say being a Watcher in any of these transformational type things can be a little bit difficult at first, especially when you don't know what the skills do, but you can make yourself a little note, or hopefully the visual aid here will help you. And now the 5th room, the hurting room. So in this room, what you need to do is go capture the wisps. I've done a short about how this is not hurting, but whatever. All you need to do is walk through the wisps and you will collect them. And then what I would recommend is kind of either holding block or feathering block so you can walk, or even maybe toggling RP walk so that you walk slowly. And as long as you don't move too fast, they will stay with you. Now you can capture multiple of these lights and then take them all together back to the center. And that's what I would recommend doing, especially in the later stages when you have like 3 or 4 of them. Sprint around to them. Once you get there, then you have to walk kind of slowly so that they follow you, and then collect all of them and move back to the center. And that's how you finish this room. It's honestly not too bad once you get the hang of it. And that is it for the bonus areas. Now let's talk about the Marauders. The Marauders are the biggest issue you'll find early on. They have a health bar that is similar to a boss, and their light attacks do more damage than anything else in the arc. It's honestly kind of crazy and a bit overtuned, and something I hope that they'll change in the near future. But these guys are the reasons you need damage mitigation. They do not die super fast because, again, they have as much health as a given boss, and even if your heals are good, their light attacks will just destroy you. Their heavy attacks hit super hard. You really need a higher health pool if you can to be able to survive these guys. There are 3 kinds that spawn, and they each have different mechanics. So the first one that we're going to talk about is the Fire Marauder. This is the hardest hitting of the adds, and their light attacks will one-shot you in the later adds. They also put a bleed on you as well. If you have a skill that reduces projectile damage, like either spamming an ice wall Ball, a Warden Shimmering Shield or the other morph, or if you're a DK Protective Plate, all of those will help you. And in that case, you can kind of kite them and try to do damage as you go along. Having this speed boost unlocked from those bonus areas and from the achievement is something that will help you if you do decide to go this method. Otherwise, I recommend trying to block every single one of their attacks because they will really chunk you down. The second hardest ad to deal with is the Lightning Marauder. This guy's really annoying because they spawn a bunch of AoEs and they kind of move in a circular pattern, and those don't go away. So it can become really hard if this guy stays alive for a very long time. The best thing to do with this guy is kind of move him into a corner, let him spawn his AoEs, and then move him out. You really don't want him spawning those AoEs in the center of the room, especially in some of the smaller areas, because it'll be really difficult to deal with because they hurt. And then the third and easiest type to deal with is the Water Marauder. So what this guy does, he basically has two channeled AoE attacks. The first one can be roll dodge. It does kind of a crashing wave mechanic or something similar to what you'd see from the Tiebreakers in Kind's Aegis, where a wave of water shoots out, does a whole bunch of damage, and knocks you back. The second AoE they have is much smaller, and that one you can just walk out of and don't have to deal with it. If you happen to be duo, though, you really want your tank grabbing those Marauders quickly, and then you DPS them down and focus them down as quickly as you can to get rid of them. Another thing you can do whenever you see the Marauders, if you haven't already, is to make sure you use a verse. If you have one quick slotted and you see one come up, go ahead and use it. Maybe it'll help you get through it a little bit quicker. Now let's go ahead and talk about the cycle bosses. So again, you'll have 5 of these before you face Thoat each time. The difficulty of these bosses varies quite a bit, but the main thing that will get you killed is not knowing the boss and not knowing what they do. Now the mechanics have largely been borrowed and taken from whatever other content they were in. So for example, if you see like the V-Maul boss that curses you, you have to go cleanse and then come back. And as long as you understand the curse mechanic and how to cleanse and what to do, it's not a big deal. If you don't understand that, you're probably just going to die. So what I recommend is each cycle boss, where if you spawn in and you don't know or recognize the boss, you can just stand there. As long as you don't move into aggro range, they won't pull, and there's no time limit. So what you can do is then go look up either a written guide, or actually Zynode has a video where he goes through the mechanics on like all of these bosses. There is a ton of them. I don't know that he's got every single one 100% correct. I haven't checked the video that much, but I did look at a few, and he seemed to be giving some really solid advice and explaining things quite well, which he's done in his other guides, but for those of you who don't know. So you can just pause there, go take a look, ask your friends in Discord, whatever you need to do, and then come back and fight the boss. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that the penetration values vary. They're a little over 9k for the ads and 18k for the bosses. So making sure you're at pin cap will be very important and will vary the difficulty considerably if you are not at pin cap. You'll also notice your vision and verse buffs probably the most here. A fast burn means doing less mechanics, and having like strong verses like Sanguinate or Multitude, or the 50% bonus to AoE or class damage or stuff like that, having those verse buffs are huge. And it might be a case where you want to go ahead and use one of your consumable ones on that third and fourth cycle so that it's easier to get through that boss. Okay, now moving on to actual Thoat. So Thoat Replicanum, what he does is whenever he attacks you, he will cause an AoE to spawn at your feet. You just need to move out of that and kite him out of that, hopefully while not moving him too far outside of your AoEs. Now after he's done that for a bit, he'll actually pause and do a channeled ability. This brings up the Shield of Mirrors. The mirrors, what they do is whenever you deal direct damage to him, it will spawn a shard, and then after 3.5 seconds, it will shoot at you. And that can end up one-shotting you. I think that's probably the thing that causes most people to die. I know it got me several times when I first was in the Endless Archive. There are 2 ways of dealing with this. The first is just to dot him up, as dots won't trigger this attack, and just not do any direct damage attacks. The second and faster way is actually just get inside of his shield, so go stand right up on him. Now you do need to make sure that you're not standing in the AoEs that spawned when he attacked you earlier, so make sure you kite him out of that before he starts channeling. But in that situation, you can just continue to parse. Noting, of course, that you will still have to deal with the Watcher eyes that spawn and do the channeled AoE thing, and also the blobs. Now, once you made it to the second arc, you will have to deal with the Atronach boss that spawns, or Atronach Shard, I believe is it's called. The only new mechanic with this boss is that it spawns tentacles, both small and large, and if you are near the tentacles, they will do a swipe AoE at you after a second or 2. You can just roll those and then just move out of them, and then just kind of avoid that area, and you generally should be fine. I will note that the Atronach will not chase you, but he will teleport periodically from time to time. So just tab target him, make sure you're focusing him, and then follow him around as he teleports around. I will note that this boss, and this applies to a lot of things in the archive, are a lot easier at range and with more ranged abilities, because a lot of times he'll spawn in the middle of those tentacles, and you have to deal with them more if that's the case, either by dodge rolling and then continuing to DPS, or by moving in and out of the AoEs to kind of kite them. Now again, at 60% on the Atronach, you'll spawn the Manticore, and this is beginning in Arc 3, as you get an additional new boss at each arc, up to and including Arc 4. Sorry if I didn't make that clear earlier. So this is the third boss, and then we'll get one more when we're finally to Arc 4. And then after that, at least currently, we do not get any more bosses. I imagine that will change in the future. The new mechanic for this boss is a glass ceiling AoE that spawns above you and then will detonate after 3.5 seconds. So a similar timing to the shards that we had to deal with Thoat Replicana. All you need to do is roll dodge when you see the AoEs appear, give it like half a second and then roll dodge, and you won't take any damage. I will note that roll dodge is still broken, so sometimes that won't work, but in general, if everything's working correctly, you can just roll that and you won't have a problem. This boss will also spawn glass walls with one of its attacks. They are pretty annoying to deal with, honestly, while trying to like kite various other AoEs, and we have ran into an issue where they become invisible, so have invisible walls. I died to that on my first kind of deep dive into the archive on like Arc 5 or something like that. That was pretty frustrating, but just realize that that can happen. But whenever these spawn, the best thing to do is just move the boss out of that area entirely. The arena is huge at that point, and so you should be able to do that without too much of an issue. And then at 60% on that boss, the Dragon Shard will spawn. So he spawns two kinds of AoEs. There's large and small ones. As is the case with many mechanics in ESO, the smaller ones are the ones you really got to move out of and get away from, and then the larger ones you generally speaking can't escape. At least I wasn't able to without like streaking or something else. But the good news is the large ones don't do enough damage to like one-shot you. They're not as bad. So you just want to keep moving during that phase and make sure you move out of the smaller AoEs, and then block if you need to with the larger ones. Although if you're keeping dots on the boss and you have Ring of the Pale Order on, which I strongly suggest, you probably won't have much of an issue. Another trick with a dragon is to stand right at the edge of the arena and have him walk closer towards you, and that makes it easier, especially if you're melee, so you can walk up and still hit him easily with your melee skills while having more room to kite around the donut, the kind of the outer edge of this boss, which you'll have to move to when he comes down to actually fight. And I think we've covered just about everything, so hopefully this was a good overview of all the mechanics you'll have to deal with and good general advice on how to deal with each one. If you're looking to make your own build or you're looking for class-specific guides, again, I have plenty of them here on the channel, and I'm kind of moving through the various classes. I usually go very in-depth and try to cover everything as deeply as possible, give you options, explain things, but I also have some pre-made builds where you can just kind of copy it and go with that, and that also works fine. Although in the Endless Archive, swapping up and kind of modifying your build as you go along is going to be very important, especially if you want to push deeper. But anyways, that's it for today. I appreciate you guys watching. If you like this guide and you'd like to support the channel, please consider becoming a channel member. There's no real benefit to that other than it helps me to make more content. Or hey, if you like my content, just keep watching it. That's the most important thing you can do. You know, hitting the like button, hitting the subscribe, that's helpful, that's nice. But the most important thing on YouTube is just watching them. So, you know, if you find them helpful and they're helpful for you, share them with your friends, and maybe we can get the word out a little bit. Appreciate you guys watching, and we'll catch you in the next one. Let's get it.